Well, first of all, right off the bat, apologies for not putting out things for a while, but certain issues got in the way. Okay, but without further ado, let's get right to the topic. Regarding Kubrick, we often see certain directors constantly brought up: Paul Thomas Anderson, David Fincher, even Steven Spielberg, but one person who is usually not cited, even though, as I'll try to show, the influence is pretty strong, is Joss Whedon. And we're going to go through some both empirical but also speculative moments of contact between his work and Kubrick's work. So probably beginning with is that the resources they both tap into are almost identical. For instance, Kubrick used Campbell's Hero's Journey book for 2001, and Whedon read Campbell's Hero's book, the Hero book, while in college. And if you see Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's pretty clearly modeled that she has a kind of hero's journey. They're also both big into Shakespeare. I think Whedon obviously is a little bit more explicit, but if you do a lot of research on Kubrick, you'll know that he likes using a lot of Shakespearean tropes, especially with Clockwork Orange, where he cited Richard III as a model for Alex. So they have a lot of similar sources they go back to. Now, in terms of actual visual influences that we can see, in one Buffy episode, we see her in a flashback episode in Becoming, where she looks distinctly like Lolita, because she's playing a very young teenage girl. Even within the context of the show, she looks really, really young. And of course, Lolita is a film that Kubrick directed. More substantively in terms of the plot, there's another Buffy episode called Gone, which references The Shining. There's a moment where Buffy, sort of avenging a social worker that's tormenting her, replays the Jack scene where Jack is typing madly on the typewriter and just says the same sentence over and over again, and she does the same thing in Gone. Also, of course, in Angel, they actually literally have Hyperion, which is introduced in season 2, and it's kind of like a haunted hotel, and that theme is brought up explicitly in the episode Billy, where Wes chases Fred with an axe, which of course replays what Jack does with Wendy and Danny in The Shining, chasing people with an axe. There's also a parallel between Wes and Gunn and Jack and Halloran in The Shining. So it's some interesting intertextual references there. And there's also even some bit of Kubrick in the first season of Angel with Spartacus. There's an episode called The Ring, which owes a lot more to Fight Club. I'll admit that. Fight Club is much more dominant. But there is a touch of Spartacus with Angel sort of doing a kind of gladiator character who fights in a ring. Even in terms of plots, in Firefly, for instance, there's a heist episode called The Train Job, and Kubrick's first major film is called The Killing, which of course is about a bank heist. They don't take too much visually in those two things, but obviously there's a connection. There's even interesting a connection in terms of casting. Adam Baldwin worked on Full Metal Jacket, and he's in Firefly, but he's also an Angel. So there's an interesting kind of auteur touch in terms of casting the same actors. And Fincher has done this as well. If you look at Seven, he cast Lee Ermey in a role in Seven. There's also certain stylistic issues where they sort of complement one another. Even though Whedon's known for his dialogue, he does like to do a lot of long takes where people don't talk. He's also done one entire episode where there's no dialogue. And then there's the Once More with Feeling episode, which is just musical movements of the characters. There's obviously a lot of singing and dialogue, but the focus is on bodily movement. And if you look at a lot of Kubrick's work, he's really obsessed with how characters move, almost as if they have like a dance-like movement to their walk, especially in Clockwork Orange. So again, there's a lot of interesting thematic and visual places where they hook up. But in terms of biography too, Whedon has acknowledged that Kubrick is a huge influence. He watched The Shining as a teenager and was deeply affected, not just by the actual plot and story, but sort of like how sort of obsessive Kubrick was about getting the scene right. And if you know some of the backstories with Whedon, he often takes whole hours just to make sure one scene is done, sort of perfected and sort of done the way he wants it, or done with improvisation so that it gets the right tone and the right feeling with the characters and actors. So overall, a lot of interesting little places where they come together. So next time you're watching a Kubrick film, you probably want to see how Joss is both taken and borrowed, but also twisted. It's not just the case that Whedon is stealing or influenced. There's clearly a sort of, he's responding to the text and trying to put his own take on how Kubrick did things. Nor am I claiming he's the sole or perhaps biggest influence. I'd probably argue that Hitchcock is a much, much bigger, more persistent influence on Whedon. But still, the Kubrick influence is right there, and if you see the examples given, that the strains are definitely there. All right, this has been Kubrick Analyzed on the Joss Whedon factor in Kubrick land. If you like the content, please hit the like button and/or subscribe. Kubrick Analyzed. Please be safe. Thank you for listening.